The twin suns were slowly disappearing behind the jagged cliffs of HFY, casting long shadows across the dusty landscape. The small human settlement sat on the edge of a canyon, its buildings low and sturdy, made from the local stone and reinforced with scavenged metal. Life here was harsh, but humans had a way of surviving even in the most difficult places. They were not the strongest species in the galaxy, but they had grit, courage, and a stubbornness that often surprised aliens who underestimated them. Ethan rode his worn-out hoverbike along the perimeter of the settlement, his eyes scanning the horizon for any signs of trouble. He was young, not yet 25, but his skills were already known among the settlers. The aliens in this sector did not usually bother human colonies unless they sensed weakness, and Ethan had learned to make them think twice. His hand rested lightly on the handle of his energy rifle, more as a habit than a need. Most of the time, threats could be handled with careful strategy, rather than direct confrontation, but tonight something felt different. A flicker of movement in the canyon below caught his attention. At first he thought it was just a dust devil, a common occurrence in the wind-swept valleys. But then he heard a faint, irregular signal through his communicator, a distress call, weak and broken but unmistakably human. His pulse quickened. The signal was coming from the mining settlement at the edge of the cliffs, where families had begun extracting the rare minerals that made HFY valuable to outsiders. Ethan did not hesitate. He twisted the throttle on his hoverbike and shot down the narrow path toward the settlement, the wind tearing past his face. As he approached, he could see smoke rising from the outskirts. Alien shapes moved in the distance, much larger than any human, their bodies glinting with armor and energy weapons. Panic and fear were easy to read on the faces of the settlers as they tried to defend themselves. Ethan's jaw tightened. He had trained for moments like this, but he had never faced this many at once. Yet retreat was not an option. He landed his hoverbike behind a large rock and crouched. From this vantage point, he could see a young woman trapped near the central building. She was pinned by debris, her small frame barely visible as the alien raiders circled closer. Her eyes met his, wide with terror, and she instinctively turned to flee, but there was no path to safety. Ethan raised his hand slightly, signaling her to stay put. He could feel the fear in the air, thick and suffocating, but he could not let it control him. Drawing on every lesson he had learned about alien behavior, he took a deep breath and began his plan. He would not charge in recklessly. The odds were against him. Instead, he used the environment to his advantage. Large boulders provided cover, and the uneven terrain could be turned into traps. He glanced around, spotting a narrow chute between two cliffs. If he could lure a few raiders into it, he could create a bottleneck, neutralizing their advantage in numbers and size. Carefully, he fired his energy rifle, not to kill, but to distract. A bolt of light streaked past, hitting a rock near one of the raiders. The alien paused, confused by the sudden attack. Others looked toward the noise, giving Ethan the opening he needed. He crept closer, low and silent, using every shadow as cover. Each step required patience and precision. One mistake could mean death. Finally, he reached the base of the building where the young woman was trapped. She looked at him with a mixture of hope and disbelief. I thought it was over," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Not while I'm here," Ethan said simply. His voice was calm, but there was an unspoken strength behind it that seemed to give her courage. He quickly examined the debris blocking her path. It was heavy, but not impossible to move. Using a small energy cutter, he worked steadily, cutting through metal and stone until a path opened. "Come on, stay close," he instructed. As she scrambled free, the aliens began to advance again, sensing their prey slipping away. Ethan grabbed a thermal flare from his belt and tossed it toward the choke point he had identified earlier. The flare exploded in a burst of light and heat, causing the lead raider to stumble. Others hesitated, unsure of how to proceed. It was enough. He motioned for her to follow, and together they moved toward a more secure building at the edge of the settlement. Inside, the air was thick with dust and tension. Settlers were gathering their families, trying to find safety while keeping watch on the approaching raiders. Ethan didn't allow himself a moment of rest. He moved among the settlers, offering instructions, positioning barricades, and organizing those willing to fight. Even though he was human, his presence had a strange effect on the aliens. They were cautious now, uncertain if attacking further would be worth the risk. The young woman Lyra stayed close to him, her eyes darting from Ethan to the windows, scanning for threats. How are you doing this? She asked, awe in her voice. Humans have ways of surviving, Ethan replied with a small smile, not arrogant, but firm. We find solutions when others see only problems. We don't give up. Her gaze lingered on him, and for the first time she saw humans differently. Not fragile, not weak, but clever and resilient. The night stretched on, the stars above blinking faintly through the dust and smoke. Ethan remained vigilant, moving from one vantage point to another, watching for any signs of the aliens' return. Lyra tried to stay awake, but exhaustion began to weigh on her. Seeing her struggle, Ethan guided her to a corner behind a sturdy wall and sat beside her, keeping watch. Hours passed, each minute stretching longer than the last. The wind howled outside, carrying strange alien scents, but no raiders appeared. Ethan's focus never wavered. He understood that fear could be as dangerous as any enemy. Letting it take root in those around him would lead to mistakes. His calm, steady presence reassured the settlers, and Lyra began to feel a sense of safety she hadn't felt in hours. You don't have to stay, she whispered after a long silence. You could rest. Ethan shook his head. Not while people need protection. Not when you might be in danger. That's what we do. We don't leave someone behind. Her admiration grew, mingled with something deeper. Respect for his courage, for the human spirit that refused to yield even in the face of overwhelming odds. She realized that humans had something the aliens could not understand fully. A relentless determination to protect life, to survive, and to stand firm even when everything seemed lost. By the time the twin suns had fully set, and the sky turned a deep shade of indigo, the immediate threat had passed. The settlement had survived the initial assault, and the raiders had retreated, wary of the humans who did not cower. Ethan continued his vigil, knowing the night was not yet over. Patrols could return or new threats could appear, but for now he had held the line. Lyra sat close to him, exhausted yet unable to sleep. Why do you do this? Why risk yourself for strangers? She asked. Ethan looked out at the darkened canyon, his eyes scanning the shadows as if he could see through the night. Because someone has to. Because humans, we do what is right even if it is hard, even if it scares us. That's what makes us strong. She studied him, trying to absorb every word, every nuance of his calm determination. For the first time, she realized that humans were capable of more than she had ever imagined. They were fragile in body, perhaps, but unbreakable in spirit. That realization changed something inside her. It gave her hope that the future of the settlement, and perhaps humanity itself, was not as bleak as she had feared. The night deepened, and Ethan's vigil continued. He watched, he waited, he protected. For Lyra and for all the settlers he stayed, a lone human standing against the darkness. And in that moment, under the alien stars and the twin moons, she understood something that she would never forget. Courage was not about the size of one's body or the strength of one's weapon. It was about the strength of the heart, and humans had plenty of that to spare. Hours would pass, and the first hints of dawn were still far away. But as long as Ethan remained awake, as long as he stayed by her side, Lyra felt a peace that no alien threat could take from her. For the first time, she believed that humans could hold their own against any danger, no matter how insurmountable it seemed. And as she watched him scan the horizon, vigilant and unyielding, she silently vowed that she would carry that lesson with her, wherever life on EpicSciFi and beyond might take her. The night had passed, but the air was still heavy with tension. Ethan's eyes never left the horizon as the first pale light of dawn crept over the cliffs. The aliens had retreated, but their presence still lingered, and the settlement had been left in a fragile state. Settlers moved cautiously among the damaged buildings, checking on the wounded and repairing barricades where they could. The twin suns of EpicSciFi began to rise, casting long golden shadows across the dusty ground, and the reality of what had just happened settled on the community. Lyra walked beside Ethan as he inspected the perimeter, her small hands clutching a worn satchel. She had not slept, and the night had left her exhausted, but curiosity and awe kept her moving. Every few steps she looked up at him, noting the calm determination in his movements. He was human, yes, and fragile in comparison to the towering alien raiders, but the way he moved, the way he thought, was unlike anything she had seen before. "You're incredible," she said quietly, I've never seen anyone fight like you did, and you weren't just lucky. You knew exactly what to do." Ethan glanced at her, his expression calm, almost amused at her surprise. "Luck is part of it," he admitted. "But mostly it's paying attention, thinking ahead, and not panicking. You have to stay calm when everything around you is trying to kill you." Lyra nodded, thinking about the moments during the night when the aliens had surrounded them, when she had thought she would not survive. She remembered how he had stayed close, never flinching, never showing fear even when they were outnumbered. I don't think I could ever be like that," she admitted. "You might be surprised," Ethan said with a small smile. "Humans adapt. You learn fast when you have to. Courage isn't something you're born with, it's something you decide to use when it matters most." They reached the edge of the settlement where the raiders had first appeared. The ground was scorched in places, and broken equipment lay scattered like broken toys. Ethan knelt and examined the tracks left behind by the aliens. "They're organized," he muttered, tracing the patterns. "They'll be back if we don't make them think twice." Lyra looked at the tracks, trying to understand. "But there are so many of them. How can humans stop them?" Ethan stood, brushing dust from his clothes. "We don't stop them by fighting one-on-one. We stop them by thinking differently, by using what we have in ways they don't expect. Humans survive because we don't just follow the rules of strength. We make our own." For the next several hours, Ethan worked tirelessly, moving from one part of the settlement to another. He organized the remaining settlers, helping them reinforce buildings and set up traps along likely paths for alien attacks. He showed them how to use the terrain to their advantage, how to anticipate the movement of creatures far stronger than themselves, and how to remain calm when fear tried to take control. Lyra followed him everywhere, watching and learning. By midday, the settlement began to take on a sense of order again. Fires were extinguished, debris cleared, and the barricades were stronger than before. But Ethan knew that the night's events were only the beginning. The aliens were not likely to leave without a plan. Their curiosity had been piqued, and humans, especially humans who could think, adapt, and fight with ingenuity, were a challenge they did not expect. Lyra finally found a moment to speak. "Why do you risk so much for people you don't even know?" she asked, her voice tinged with wonder and confusion. Ethan paused, looking out over the cliffs, his eyes following the winding canyon below. "Because someone has to," he said. "Because it matters that we protect each other. Humans survive not because we are the strongest, but because we care, because we try, and because we never give up even when everything seems impossible." Lyra absorbed his words, feeling them settle deep within her. She had thought humans were fragile, weak, easy to push aside, but now she realized how wrong she had been. Strength was not just physical, it was mental, emotional, and above all moral. Humans had a kind of courage that the aliens could not understand, a stubborn refusal to surrender to fear or death. As the day progressed, Ethan and Lyra moved to the northern edge of the settlement, where a steep cliff overlooked a narrow canyon. He pointed toward the distant horizon. "If the raiders come back, this is where we will see them first. And we'll be ready. Humans have a way of surviving that others don't expect. We turn disadvantages into advantages. That's how we fight. By thinking, not just by strength." Lyra watched him carefully, noting the ease with which he assessed the terrain, calculated risks, and predicted movements. "It's amazing," she murmured. "You make it all seem possible." Ethan shrugged lightly, though there was a quiet pride in his eyes. "It's not magic. It's training, observation, and refusing to panic. Anyone can learn it if they try. Humans are like that. We adapt, we improvise, and when others think we're finished, we keep going." Hours passed, and the settlement began to show signs of life again. Children ventured outside to play under the watchful eyes of adults, and small groups of settlers began repairing homes and equipment. Ethan continued to move among them, offering guidance and instruction, but he never allowed himself a long rest. The aliens might return at any time, and he would be ready. Lyra finally approached him as he checked a barricade along the western wall. "Ethan, do you ever get scared?" she asked, genuinely curious. He paused, considering her question. "Of course," he admitted. "Fear is natural. But fear doesn't control me, I use it. I let it sharpen my senses, make me faster, smarter. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's acting even when you're afraid." Her eyes widened as she considered his words. Everything about the humans, their determination, their ingenuity, their unwillingness to give up, was new to her. She had always thought the galaxy's dangers would crush them. But she was beginning to understand that humans had something unique, something powerful. As the sun dipped lower in the western sky, a faint signal appeared on Ethan's communicator. It was weak, almost imperceptible, but unmistakable. Alien scouts. They were returning, likely to see if the humans had recovered. Ethan's jaw tightened. This was the test he had expected. The settlers would need him to lead them again. He turned to Lyra. Stay close. Watch and learn. This is why we train, why we prepare. They'll come back, but humans aren't helpless. We don't wait to be saved, we act. And sometimes just surviving through cleverness and courage is victory enough. The next several hours were a blur of preparation. Ethan guided the settlers to positions where they could observe without being seen, setting up traps and obstacles designed to confuse and slow the aliens. Lyra assisted where she could, passing tools, moving supplies, and absorbing every lesson Ethan offered. She marveled at his ability to remain calm under pressure, to turn danger into strategy, and to inspire others without commanding them with fear. By the time the aliens approached the settlement, the humans were ready. The first scouts stepped into traps, their movement slowed by the clever obstacles Ethan had arranged. Others were distracted by controlled flares and decoys, allowing the settlers to defend themselves with minimal risk. Ethan remained at the center, moving swiftly to reinforce weak points, protect the vulnerable, and ensure that the humans maintained the upper hand through ingenuity rather than brute strength. Lyra watched in awe as the humans executed a coordinated defense. Every move was precise, every decision calculated. She realized that this was what Ethan had meant. Humans survived because they adapted, because they thought, because they refused to give up even when the odds were against them. Hours passed, and the aliens, frustrated and confused by the humans' resilience, finally began to retreat. Ethan remained vigilant until the last of them disappeared over the horizon. The settlers erupted in quiet cheers, relieved that the threat had been managed without unnecessary loss. Lyra, exhausted and exhilarated, turned to Ethan. I don't know how you do it. You're human, and yet you're different. Ethan smiled faintly, the first real smile of the day. We're all human, he said. We just don't give up. That's what makes the difference. That's why humans matter, no matter where we are in the galaxy. Lyra nodded slowly, feeling the truth of his words settle deep within her. She had witnessed courage, ingenuity, and resilience unlike anything she had ever imagined. Humans were fragile in body, yes, but unbreakable in spirit, and now she understood that spirit and that courage was why they could survive, even in the most dangerous corners of the galaxy. As the sun set again, painting the cliffs in shades of gold and crimson, Ethan continued to move among the settlers, ensuring that everyone was safe, that every weak point was covered. Lyra stayed near him, watching, learning, and beginning to understand what it truly meant to be human. In the quiet moments, she realized something important. Survival was more than staying alive. It was about courage, intelligence, and the refusal to surrender. And humans, she now knew, had all of that in abundance. The first light of dawn was soft and pale, brushing over the cliffs of EpicSciFiTales. The settlement had endured another night, and although the threat of the alien raiders had passed for now, the air was still tense. Ethan walked along the main street, checking on the settlers and ensuring that no danger had been overlooked. His energy rifle hung at his side, ready but not yet needed. Each step he took seemed to bring a quiet sense of reassurance to those around him. Humans had a strange power, one that was not always obvious. The ability to inspire confidence through determination alone. Lyra followed closely behind him, her eyes scanning the horizon as she tried to anticipate what might come next. Her admiration for Ethan had only grown over the past 2 days. She had seen him in action, watched him face overwhelming odds with calm focus, and guided others through chaos with clarity and purpose. She had begun to understand what humans truly were, creatures of adaptability, courage, and resilience. They were fragile by alien standards, yet their strength lay in their minds, their hearts, and their will to survive. Do you think they'll come back? Lyra asked quietly, her voice filled with worry. Ethan shook his head, but his eyes never left the distant cliffs. It's possible, he said, but humans don't wait for trouble. We prepare for it. That's why we adapt, that's why we survive. If they return, we will be ready, and we will show them why humans are not easy to defeat. Lyra nodded, feeling a strange mixture of hope and fear. She had grown up thinking humans were weak, fragile creatures, and yet here was proof of their extraordinary spirit. For the first time, she realized that survival was not always about strength, size, or advanced technology. It was about courage, cleverness, and the willingness to stand firm when the odds seemed impossible. The settlement began to stir as the day progressed. Children emerged cautiously from their homes, curious about the repairs taking place and the faint hum of activity that filled the streets. Adults worked tirelessly, repairing damaged buildings, reinforcing barricades, and checking supplies. Ethan moved among them, offering guidance, helping where needed, and ensuring that morale remained high. He did not demand respect. It came naturally, a result of the confidence and competence he displayed in every action. Lyra stayed near him, carrying tools and supplies, learning from every gesture, every decision he made. She had begun to see the humans' unique approach to danger. They did not rely solely on weapons or armor. They relied on ingenuity, resourcefulness, and the ability to turn weakness into strength. Each human, she observed, seemed capable of incredible creativity under pressure. Ethan was the living example of that principle, but she suspected that the same spirit ran through every human in the settlement. By mid-afternoon, a faint signal appeared on Ethan's communicator. He crouched and studied it carefully. The aliens had not returned in force, but scouts were moving along the cliffs, testing the settlement's defenses. Ethan's jaw tightened. This was the moment that would prove whether the humans could hold their own, not through brute force, but through strategy and determination. He stood and called a small group of settlers to him, including Lyra. "We don't need to fight blindly," he said, his voice steady. "We need to outthink them. Humans survive because we adapt, because we prepare, because we never stop learning. Watch me and you'll see what I mean." Lyra watched closely as he moved with precision, setting up signals, flares, and traps designed to mislead the alien scouts. He explained each step, teaching the settlers to anticipate the enemy's movements and to use the environment to their advantage. Rocks were positioned to block paths, narrow alleys were reinforced with debris, and flares were placed to create the illusion of movement where none existed. Hours passed, and the alien scouts approached cautiously. They were enormous, towering over the humans with armor that glinted in the afternoon sun. But as they moved forward, they encountered the clever obstacles Ethan had arranged. Some stumbled into traps, while others hesitated at decoys, unsure of where the humans were hiding. Each small success bolstered the confidence of the settlers, who had begun to understand that they were not helpless, even against creatures far larger and stronger than themselves. Lyra helped where she could, moving flares, adjusting positions, and carrying supplies. She noticed how calm Ethan remained even when danger was near. He was fully aware of the risks, but he did not allow fear to cloud his judgment. His courage was not reckless. It was measured, deliberate, and infectious. The settlers began to move with greater confidence, inspired by his example, and the alien scouts began to retreat, frustrated by the humans' unpredictability and clever use of terrain. When the last of the scouts had disappeared over the horizon, Ethan gathered the settlers. "Humans survive not because we are the strongest," he said, "but because we think, we plan, and we refuse to give up. We adapt, we protect each other. That is what makes us powerful." Lyra felt a warmth in her chest as she listened. She had seen this principle in action, witnessed courage and ingenuity that no alien could fully understand. Humans were not perfect, and they were often vulnerable, but their spirit, unwavering, clever, and determined, made them a force to be reckoned with. As the day drew to a close, Ethan moved through the settlement once more, checking every corner, every barricade, every precaution. Lyra walked beside him, now confident in her understanding of human strength. She had learned something invaluable. Humans might be small, fragile, and underestimated, but their courage and determination made them capable of surviving anything. Night fell and the settlement grew quiet. Fires were lit in small braziers, casting flickering light across the dusty streets. Ethan remained vigilant, watching the horizon for any signs of return, while Lyra finally allowed herself to rest nearby. She felt safe, not because the danger had disappeared, but because Ethan and the humans of the settlement had proven that courage, intelligence, and determination could turn even the most hopeless situation into a chance for survival. In the quiet hours, Lyra reflected on everything she had witnessed. She had seen humans face overwhelming odds, improvise under pressure, and protect those who could not defend themselves. She had seen courage and ingenuity that no alien technology could match. For the first time, she believed that humans had something unique, something powerful, the unbreakable will to survive and protect others. No matter the cost, Ethan finally sat beside her, letting the stars above shine in their alien brilliance. "It's not just about fighting," he said softly. "It's about refusing to give up even when you're scared. It's about thinking, adapting, and protecting those who cannot protect themselves. That's what humans do best." Lyra nodded, feeling the truth of his words settle deep inside her. "I understand now," she said. "Humans, you're not just survivors. You're extraordinary." Ethan smiled faintly, a quiet acknowledgement rather than pride. "We survive because we have to, and we fight because it's right. That's what makes humans human." The night passed peacefully. The settlement, once threatened and vulnerable, had endured through courage, cleverness, and determination. Lyra had learned more in these hours than she had in a lifetime of observing other species. She now understood what humans were capable of, and she knew that their spirit, their resilience, and their unyielding will would make them a force that no alien could underestimate. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon again, Lyra watched Ethan standing on a high ledge, scanning the cliffs for any sign of return. His stance was calm, confident, and unyielding, a perfect embodiment of the human spirit. And in that moment, she understood something vital. Humans did not need to be the largest, the strongest, or the most advanced to survive. They needed courage, intelligence, and heart, and they had all three in abundance. For the rest of her life, Lyra would remember the night and the day she spent beside Ethan. She would remember how humans could face impossible odds and prevail, not through brute strength but through courage, ingenuity, and unshakable determination. She had witnessed humanity at its finest, and she knew that whatever the galaxy threw at them, humans would endure, adapt, and survive. Ethan remained vigilant, ready for whatever came next. Lyra sat nearby, finally able to rest, her mind alive with the lessons she had learned. The settlement was safe, at least for now, and she knew that humans had shown something extraordinary, not just to her, but to anyone who had witnessed their courage. The twin suns of EpicSciFi rose again, casting warm light across the cliffs and valleys. Humans moved through the settlement with quiet confidence, repairing what had been damaged and preparing for the future. They were small in size, yes, but their courage and determination were immense. They survived, adapted, and thrived no matter the danger, no matter the odds. And that, Lyra realized, was the true power of humanity. Ethan turned toward her, a faint smile on his face. "Ready for another day?" he asked. Lyra nodded, her heart full of admiration and understanding. "Yes," she said. "I think I finally understand what it means to be human." Together they looked out over the canyon, over the settlement that humans had protected and defended, and over a horizon full of possibilities. The night was over, but the story of human courage, resilience, and ingenuity had only just begun.